Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Jimmy Kimmel invited Mike Lindell onto his show on Wednesday night. Audience say Lindell's performance was so humble that it beats Kimmel in all aspects. Biden's first address to Congress is filled with empty platitudes. He's not telling the truth in order to hide his socialist agenda. Senator Tim Scott's response to Biden's first 100 days has won him applause from the crowd. While Biden rolls out his radical policies one after another, Trump is making his comeback. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. On Wednesday, Joe Biden delivered his first address to a joint session of Congress on his 100th day in office. Biden attempted to use his 65-minute speech to paint the future of the nation with his administration's radical proposals on infrastructure, health care, education, police reform, immigration reform, tax hikes, gun control. Really, the list is radical and the agenda just goes on for so long. Biden has more than enough topics to make his 65-minute speech ambitious, boastful, and hollow. Something new in Biden's address to Congress is the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. Some refer to the plan as the Human Infrastructure Bill, as it's a follow-up to Biden's infrastructure ambition to invest in education, childcare, and offer paid family leave. The White House officially released the proposal on Wednesday ahead of Biden's speech. So what's in the Human Infrastructure Bill? The plan calls for a $200 billion program of free universal pre-kindergarten for all 3 to 4 years olds, $109 billion for free community college for any American who wants it, and $85 billion to increase grants to benefit low-income and minority students. In terms of childcare and paid family leave, the plan calls for a $225 billion investment in childcare with a $15 minimum wage for early childhood staff. Another $225 billion investment in paid family leave to care for a new child or a seriously ill family member. A $45 billion investment in meal programs for children and low-income families, and expanding premium tax credits in the Affordable Care Act indefinitely. In short, the $1.8 trillion Human Infrastructure Bill would provide free universal pre-kindergarten, free college, a free family leave program, free aid for minority-serving institutions, and permanent child tax credit expansion. Under Joe Biden's leadership, America is transforming into a socialist welfare country. But wait, nothing is really free in a socialist country. The American Families Plan is expected to be paid over in 15 years. On top of the corporate tax hike from 21% to 28% to fund his infrastructure bill, Biden claimed he collected more money from the wealthy to fund his human infrastructure proposal. He'll roll back the 2017 tax cut law, the signature achievement of President Trump's term in office. Biden's plan to find an additional $700 billion over 10 years, partly through weaponizing the Internal Revenue Services, the IRS. He'll hike the income tax rate on the highest earners to 39.6%, double the capital gains tax to households making more than $1 million a year. If you think there will be no tax hike for the middle class, as Biden promised, you are wrong. Given the widely expensive $4 trillion total infrastructure agenda, it's naive to think that only the super wealthy will fund it. Eventually, everyone will pay more taxes to fuel the government's spending. Chris Christie, the former two-term Republican governor of New Jersey, says Biden didn't tell the truth to the American people to hide a socialist agenda. Biden repeatedly vowed that he wouldn't tax anybody making under $400,000 a year, and that's a lie. Christie argues what Biden described as a family business tax increase means any family that's starting a business is subject to tax increase regardless of how much money you make. After hearing Biden's first address to Congress, Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina made an excellent comment on Biden's first 100 days.
We just heard President Biden's first address to Congress. Our president seems like a good man. His speech was full of good words, but President Biden promised you a specific kind of leadership. He promised to unite a nation, to lower the temperature, to govern for all Americans, no matter how we voted. This was the pitch. You just heard it again. But our nation is starving for more than empty platitudes. We need policies and progress that brings us closer together. But 3 months in, the actions of the president and his party are pulling us further and further apart.
Scott described Biden's speech as empty platitudes. As an African American himself, Scott also revealed the true intentions behind Biden's attack on Georgia's new voting law, which is about rigging the election in the future.
The president absurdly claims that this is worse than Jim Crow. What is going on here? I'll tell you, a Washington power grab. This misplaced outrage is supposed to justify Democrats' new sweeping bill that would take over elections for all 50 states. It would send public funds to political campaigns you disagree with and make the bipartisan Federal Elections Commission partisan. This is not about civil rights or our racial past. It's about rigging elections in the future.
It may surprise you that when the Democrat Party was first formed in 1828, its platform was against big government and progressive reforms such as the abolition of slavery. Posing as the party of the common man, Democrats gained the support of impoverished farmers. At the end of the 19th century, the Democratic Party identified with rural and conservative values. That was a long time ago, but at least Democrats once represented the working class and standing up for the little guy. Since the progressive era around the beginning of the 20th century, the Democratic Party has been through several progressive reforms. Eventually, over the last 3 decades, the party has been taken over by Washington-based politicians who raised money from corporate and Wall Street executives and get votes from upper-middle-class households in suburbs in swing states. The latest data from the IRS confirms Democrats are now the party of the wealthy. In 2020, Democrats represented 65% of taxpayers with a household income of $500,000 or more, while 74% of taxpayers in Republican districts have household incomes of less than $100,000. 30 years ago, the typical Republican district was 14% richer than its Democratic counterpart, but this has been reversed today. Those Republican districts are now 13% poorer than the Democratic ones. This data comes as some Democrats push to end former President Trump's 2017 tax law. The law caps the federal deduction for state and local taxes at $10,000. Who would be the beneficiary if they abolished this law? The richest. They're predominantly 1% of America's wealthiest households with property owners in high-tax states. Some Democrat lawmakers, especially in high-tax states such as New York and New Jersey, care very much about the money of the wealthiest. Not their votes, their money. These Democrats vow and even threaten to object to Joe Biden's multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure package if Trump's tax reduction cap isn't reversed. Democrat Representative Tom Suozzi from New York said, "I'm not voting for any change in the tax code whatsoever unless there's the restoration of the SALT tax deduction. I'm laying that cheat on the table." In his first address to the Congress from the podium, Biden called Kamala Harris Madam Vice President to express his respect. But what do Americans think of their first female vice president? A new Rasmussen Reports poll shows a majority 51% of likely voters have a negative impression of Harris, including 43% with very unfavorable impression of Biden's VP. Today, many Americans feel Biden is unlikely to complete his 4-year term due to physical and mental incompetence. Last August, even 49% of Democrats didn't expect Biden to serve his full term if elected in November, according to another Rasmussen poll. So the new poll also asked Americans, how qualified is Kamala Harris to assume the responsibilities of the presidency? Half of the respondents said Harris is not qualified to become president, and of those, 41% said she's not at all qualified. As Harris continues to avoid visiting the southern border to face the biggest crisis in the Biden administration to date, we can expect her approval rating will keep declining. Now, before we continue, if you like our program, please hit that like button and subscribe. It'll help more people see our videos, and if you want to support the Eye Opener, click on the Teespring link in the description to purchase a mug that matters. Your support is greatly appreciated. Okay, my friends, let's get back to the show. The House Press Gallery revoked Epoch Times press credentials. Crossroads host Joshua Phillip told Tucker Carlson in an interview on Tuesday. The Epoch Times is a rising star independent news outlet that caught many people's attention during the 2020 presidential race. When all mainstream media rushed to declare Joe Biden's victory, the Epoch Times didn't follow the crowd but gave substantial coverage in the legal challenges against the election results. In fact, The Epoch Times has been around since 2000. Since its launch, it has been a harsh critic of the Chinese Communist Party, which in turn attacks the Epoch Times from time to time. Phillips said while they haven't received any explanation from Congress telling them why this happened, CCP state-run media has absolutely no problem accessing Congress.
Am I mischaracterizing this? Why would they pull your press credentials?
Well, Tucker, they didn't really tell us anything in writing yet, and so we're still trying to find information on it. But, as you mentioned, there's a lot of hypocrisy here. Because while they're banning the Epoch Times, they're letting in literal state-run Chinese news outlets, Xinhua, People's Daily, and these news outlets are state-run by the Chinese Communist Party propaganda outlets allowed into our, halls of Congress, while Epoch Times is not.
Phillips said a lot of American news outlets are trying to cozy up to the Chinese government today, but the Epoch Times has remained a thorn in the side of the CCP. 17 Congress members have stepped forward to defend the Epoch Times since the incident. Phillips hopes they'll be able to get back to Congress soon. People recognize the Epoch Times for defending President Trump's legal challenge in the past election. Since January 20th, Trump hasn't made any public appearance except his CPAC speech. But according to multiple news sources on Wednesday, Trump may resume his political rallies as early as May. The former president is expected to emerge as a focal point of opposition to Joe Biden's radical agenda and the Republican establishment who distanced themselves from his movement. The rallies are also a powerful platform for Trump to support Republicans he endorsed for the midterms. As for whether Trump will run for president again in 2024, he said if he runs, an official announcement will likely not happen until after the 2022 elections. It's very reasonable that Trump wouldn't want to make the decision prematurely. The most important factor to get right is not really the outcome of the midterms, but the integrity of it. Ohio's policy prevents transgender people from changing their birth certificates. However, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio decided the certificate rule was unconstitutional. Last December, the court ruled Ohio must allow gender changes to birth certificates. To comply with the federal court's radical ruling, the Ohio Department of Health is set to establish a procedure by June 1st that transgenders born in the state can amend their birth certificates to reflect the gender they self-identify. People will not be able to tell their biological sex on the birth certificates. The radical gender identity movement is messing up the concept of sex. Following this trend, one day there will be no such term as transgender because your birth certificate won't recognize your biological sex from the start. It's shameful for the federal court to make such a regressive ruling when more and more Americans are realizing the absurdity of the whole gender identity movement. Just on Tuesday, the White House made another shameful confession that it's okay to conduct research using aborted baby tissue. The Biden administration reversed the Trump-era ban on federal-funded medical research using fetal tissue obtained from aborted babies. Tom McCloskey, president of the March for Life Action, blasted the move, saying this type of experimental research is a gross violation of human dignity. The government has no business creating a marketplace for aborted baby parts. A statement from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says it's deeply offensive to millions of Americans for our tax dollars to be used for research that collaborates with an industry built on the taking of innocent lives. However, when a reporter asked Press Secretary Jen Psaki to comment on the criticism, she responded.
Look, I think the White House respectfully disagrees, and we believe that it's important to invest in science and look for opportunities to cure diseases, and I think that's what this is hopeful to do.
For our last story of the day, I wanted to talk about Mike Lindell's interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night. The 18-minute interview, which mainstream media headlines are labeling as bonkers, a train wreck, and weird among other terms, is available on YouTube in case you haven't seen it. The night show host strategy wasn't at all sophisticated. Actually, it was rather simple. Attack Lindell's credibility. Kimmel repeatedly brought up Lindell's past drug addiction. The MyPillow CEO started off by sharing his personal story of going from drug addiction to finding faith, and later successes as an entrepreneur. As the interview progressed and greetings were over, Kimmel got down to business. Lindell didn't attack Kimmel or the left. Instead, he stood his ground armed with nothing but the truth and his faith. Lindell described the circumstance under which he met President Trump and how he was subsequently attacked by the mainstream, and before that, he was a media darling. Lindell also talked about election integrity and stood firmly behind the evidence of interference in the 2020 presidential election. The interview ended with a look-alike impersonator of Lindell showing up, which was rather entertaining. Even Lindell himself found it humorous and had a good laugh about it. Both Lindell and Kimmel showed their true colors during last night's interview. One audience summed it up quite nicely, and I want to share this with you. I am honestly humbled and impressed at the way Mike handled such low blows. We may not all agree or align politically, but it is disappointing to watch an interviewer attack someone's character and past with addiction and mock him in such a biased and cruel way. Whether you agree with Mike or not, he handled the attack and accusations and ridicule with such grace. I think that is something to really take note of. Both Jimmy and Mike showed their character, and it will not be forgotten. That's it for today, my friends. Check out the playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, and Parler. All the links are in the description below. Now, don't forget, please sign up to our email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I want to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.